I need you to get comfortable. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, maybe it's late where you are, the world outside your window is dark and still, or perhaps dawn is just beginning to bleed light over the horizon. Settle in, because tonight we are going on a journey to a place more alien than the surface of Mars, more remote than the far side of the moon. A place of such profound darkness and unimaginable pressure that it was once considered a biological impossibility, a dead zone at the bottom of the world. We are descending, mile by terrifying mile, into the Mariana Trench, to a specific scar in the ocean floor known as Challenger Deep. And what we are about to discover there, in that crushing eternal black, will unravel everything you thought you knew about life, about our planet, and about our place in a mysteriously conscious universe. This story isn't just about the deepest water, it's about the deepest mysteries, and it begins with a simple, profound question. What if our planet is not just a rock that sprouted life, but a living, thinking entity itself? And what if the proof has been hiding in its darkest, most secret heart all along? But before we begin this descent, I'm genuinely curious. Where in the world are you listening from right now? What's the time there? Let me know in the comments below. There's something beautifully fitting about all of us, scattered across the skin of this world, peering together into its deepest soul. And if you want to join us as we explore these hidden wonders, consider subscribing. It truly helps bring more curious minds like yours into this community of exploration. Now, close your eyes if you want to. The visuals are here, but the real journey is in your imagination. Picture the deepest canyon you've ever seen. The Grand Canyon at sunset, perhaps, where the shadows stretch into forever. Now, magnify that feeling by 1,000. The Mariana Trench isn't a canyon, it's a wound. A crescent-shaped gash in the Pacific seafloor east of the Philippines, stretching over south of these 100 miles. Its deepest point, Challenger Deep, plunges down nearly 7 miles. To understand that, try to imagine Mount Everest, the tallest peak on our planet. Now imagine picking it up and dropping it into the trench. The summit would still be more than a mile beneath the ocean's surface. The pressure waiting for us down there is over 1,000 times what we feel at sea level. It is a crushing, silent force equivalent to 50 jumbo jets stacked on every square inch of your body. For decades, science declared it a place of no return, a sterile, abiotic void where chemistry itself would break down, where life was an impossibility, the ultimate dead zone. They were wrong. Spectacularly, beautifully wrong. The first clues came not from living eyes, but from cameras and sensors lowered into the abyss, returning with glimpses of ghosts, strange pale shapes drifting through the beam of a light, moving with a purpose in a world that should have no purpose, organisms that shouldn't exist, thriving in conditions that should have been instantly lethal. But the true revolution, the moment that shattered the old world of biology, came in 1960, inside a submersible called the Trieste. Two men, Jacques Picard and Don Walsh, sealed themselves into a steel sphere, a bubble of human air and warmth, and began a 5-hour freefall into a blackness no human had ever witnessed. 5 hours of descending through liquid space, listening to their vessel creak and groan under the mounting weight of an ocean. When they finally touched down on the soft, oozing sediment of Challenger Deep, 35,113 feet below, they peered out of their tiny porthole, and in the glare of their lights, they saw it. A fish, a flatfish, calmly going about its business on the seafloor. In that moment, a single solitary creature rewrote the rules. If a complex vertebrate could live here, then nothing was impossible. Life, it seemed, could find a way anywhere. But that was just the prologue. That fish was merely the first whisper from the deep, a hint of the roaring, glowing, inexplicable symphony of existence we were about to discover. What Picard and Walsh glimpsed was just the beginning, a shadow at the edge of understanding. After their historic dive, the deep trench fell silent again for over 50 years. We went to the moon, we built space stations, we sent probes to the edges of the solar system. But our own planet's deepest secret remained locked away, too expensive, too difficult, too dangerous to revisit. It wasn't until 2012 that another human, filmmaker James Cameron, made the solitary pilgrimage back to the bottom in his submersible, the Deep Sea Challenger. His journey was shorter, but his tools were sharper. And what he brought back were not just confirmations, but profound new questions. He saw that the sediment wasn't barren, it was alive. The water wasn't empty. It was a soup of microscopic activity. Every sample hinted at ecosystems of staggering complexity that had evolved in total isolation for millions of years. But to truly listen to what the trench was saying, we needed to stay a while. We needed to move beyond brief human visits and send down our robotic proxies, autonomous vehicles with cameras sensitive enough to see by the light of a single bioluminescent spark, with arms delicate enough to collect specimens without destroying them, with the patience to sit for weeks, months, and just observe. And what they observed there, in the Hadal zone named for Hades, the Greek underworld, defied every expectation. This was no barren, monolithic plain. The seafloor of the trench was a patchwork of distinct alien habitats. Near hydrothermal vents where superheated, mineral-rich water spewed from the Earth's crust like black smoke, they found entire cities built on a different kind of energy. Here, the sun was a myth. The currency of life was chemistry. Giant tube worms, taller than a person, stood in groves. They had no mouths, no digestive systems. They survived through a miraculous partnership. Bacteria living inside their tissues performed chemosynthesis, converting the toxic chemicals from the vent, hydrogen sulfide, methane, into organic energy. The worms provided the bacteria with a home and access to chemicals. The bacteria provided the worms with food. It was a perfect, intimate symbiosis that made photosynthesis look like just one option on a vast menu of life. These were ecosystems running on an entirely different operating system, but the vents were just one neighborhood. Elsewhere, they found cold seeps, where different chemicals percolated up through cracks, supporting different life. Fields of clams the size of dinner plates, ancient and patient, filtering their food from the slow, cold flow. And in the open muck between these oases, life had adapted in mind-bending ways. They found fish with bones so flexible they were almost gelatinous, proteins engineered by evolution to remain functional under pressure that would turn ours to brittle stone. They found creatures that had abandoned swim bladders, useless gas-filled sacks at these depths, and instead used oils and fats for buoyancy. And everywhere, in the absolute darkness, there was light. Bioluminescence. Jellyfish pulse like blue lanterns. Anglerfish dangle glowing lures. Shrimp emitted clouds of sparkling confetti to confuse predators. In a world where sunlight has never, ever reached, life had learned to create its own stars. Yet, the most humbling discovery was not about the strangeness of individual creatures, but about their connection to us, to everything. Scientists began to realize that these deep trenches were not irrelevant pits. They were active, crucial players in the planetary machine. They discovered that the trench acts as one of Earth's most significant carbon sinks. The slow rain of organic debris from the surface world, dead plankton, microscopic shells, the dust of life, drifts down into these depths. The peculiar conditions there, the cold, the pressure, the specific microbial communities, cause this carbon to be processed and buried in the sediment at a vastly slowed rate, locking it away from the atmosphere for millennia. Think about that for a moment. The air you are breathing right now, the stability of our climate, is partially regulated by processes happening 7 miles below the surface, in crushing darkness, by creatures that have never seen the sun. The Mariana Trench is not separate from our world. It is a fundamental beating heart in Earth's circulatory system. And this realization led to an even more staggering question. If life could not only survive, but master such extreme conditions on Earth, what did that mean for the possibility of life elsewhere? The icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn, Europa and Enceladus, have vast subsurface oceans under miles of ice, under crushing pressure, cut off from sunlight. The Mariana Trench was no longer just a curiosity. It had become our most vital laboratory, a training ground for understanding how life might thrive in the hidden oceans of alien worlds. We were no longer just exploring our planet. We were calibrating our search for life in the cosmos. And the deeper we looked, the stranger the calibrations became. As robotic sentinels kept their vigil on the seafloor, a new layer of the mystery began to unfold. It wasn't just about what lived there now, but what had always lived there. Core samples, slender cylinders of sediment pulled from the trench floor, became time machines. Locked within those layers of fine, powdery marine snow, the accumulated remains of countless generations of surface life, scientists found evidence of microbial communities so ancient they defied comprehension. These weren't just hardy survivors. They were living fossils, but not in the sense of unchanged specimens. These communities appeared to have been living continuously, slowly, patiently, for hundreds of millions of years, while continents crashed and parted above them, while dinosaurs rose and fell, while ice ages gripped the surface and retreated. These microscopic civilizations in the deep carried on, undisturbed in a silent, dark continuum. Their metabolism was so slow, it barely registered as life by our frantic standards. A single reproductive cycle could span decades, even centuries. They existed in a state of profound patience, a form of suspended animation that allowed them to endure through planetary upheavals that wiped the surface slate clean again and again. But they weren't just passive survivors, waiting for scraps from above. These ancient microbes were radical innovators. Many of them were lithotrophs, stone eaters. They derived energy not from sunlight or organic matter, but directly from the rocks and minerals of the seafloor itself. They would break down the very crust of the planet, extracting electrons from iron, sulfur, manganese, and using that energy to build their bodies. They were, in a very real sense, feeding on the Earth itself, blurring the line between the living biosphere and the non-living geosphere. They weren't just living in their environment, they were chemically conversing with it, participating in the planet's long-term geological processes. Scientists found vast bacterial mats, intricate networks stretching for miles across the seabed, forming complex cooperative societies where different species performed specialized chemical tasks, trading resources in a dark economy millions of years old. This revealed a shocking truth. The most successful form of life on Earth might not be the fast-breeding, rapidly evolving creatures of the surface, but these slow, steady, infinitely patient engineers of the deep. While surface species blaze through evolutionary chapters, these deep-time communities write in stone, their story unfolding over geological epochs. They are a living link to the earliest chapters of life on Earth, to a time when the planet was hostile, and the first life likely emerged in similar, extreme, chemical-rich environments. They were showing us that our planet's memory is biological, stored in living libraries in the dark. This discovery of a persistent, ancient, rock-based biosphere had universe-shaking implications. If life could persist in such a state for hundreds of millions of years in Earth's trenches, then the subsurface oceans of Europa or Enceladus weren't just potentially habitable. They could be inhabited right now by life forms that had achieved a similar, stable, billion-year peace. The deep trench was our window into alien biology happening right next door. But as we peered through that window, the view became even less familiar. The creatures of the deep weren't just surviving or enduring. Some of them appeared to be communicating. not just simple signals, but complex coordinated displays. Researchers began to notice patterns in the bioluminescent light shows. The pulses and flashes weren't random. They seemed to serve as a language in the darkness, signaling food, warning of danger, coordinating mating rituals. Deep-sea fish evolved eyes capable of discerning dozens of distinct shades and patterns of this living light, reading a narrative in the dark that we were only beginning to decipher. And then, in the most isolated crevices, around the most stable vents and seeps, they found something that looked like structure. Not just aggregations, but what could only be called settlements. Colonies of tube worms and sponges formed complex three-dimensional architectures that provided shelter for other species. Certain cephalopods, those intelligent relatives of the octopus, displayed behaviors that seemed to go beyond instinct. Tool use, strategic cooperation, even what looked like cultivation of bacterial gardens. It was a hint, a whisper of something profound. That intelligence, perhaps even culture, might not be the sole property of sunlit worlds. That in the constant, stable pressure cooker of the deep, where every calorie of energy was precious, minds might have evolved not for tool-making in a variable world, but for masterful manipulation of chemistry and energy in a world of eternal constants. The trench was not just a biological reservoir. It was becoming apparent it might be a cognitive one as well. The notion of deep-sea intelligence moved from speculation to startling observation with the deployment of new, long-duration observatories. These weren't just visiting robots. They were undersea laboratories, parked on the abyssal plain for years, powered by novel systems that drew energy from the chemical differences between vent fluids and seawater. Their sensitive instruments began to record not just moments, but the long-term rhythms of trench life. And the rhythms they found were breathtaking. They witnessed what scientists dubbed underwater auroras, vast cascading waves of bioluminescence that would light up entire swaths of the trench for hours at a time. These weren't just pretty lights. They were massive coordinated biological events, likely triggered by synchronized bacteria, creating living curtains of light that served to confuse predators, attract mates, or signal shifts in ocean chemistry on a grand scale. The creatures of the deep were painting with light on a canvas of darkness, and they were doing it together. It was within these stable, ancient communities that researchers began to document behaviors so sophisticated they rattled the foundations of ethology. Around certain hydrothermal vent complexes, they observed cephalopod communities that displayed what could only be termed social learning and tradition. Younger individuals weren't just born with instincts, they were taught. Older, experienced octopuses and squid were seen demonstrating complex techniques to juveniles, how to manipulate specific rocks to create shelters, how to herd and cultivate particular shrimp or crab species, how to safely extract food from dangerous anemones. These techniques varied from one vent community to another, even when the environments were nearly identical. They were distinct cultures, passed down through generations in the eternal dark. This was a thunderclap of a discovery. Culture was supposed to be the realm of humans, a few great apes, some whales and dolphins. The idea that in the crushing, silent hell of the deep ocean, organisms had developed their own traditions, their own ways of passing knowledge across generations, forced a complete reevaluation of what intelligence even meant. It suggested that the drive to learn, to teach, to build upon the past might be a universal imperative of complex consciousness, emerging wherever conditions are stable enough to allow it. And the conditions in the trench were uniquely stable. While surface ecosystems are buffeted by storms, seasons, and climate change, the Hadal Zone is a world of near-permanent constancy. Temperature, pressure, and chemical gradients change with glacial slowness. This stability, scientists realized, provided the temporal space for something extraordinary: long-term planning and engineering. They found evidence that some of these deep-sea societies had been thriving in the same locations for thousands of years. Carbon dating of the mineral structures built by tube worms and the midden piles of shells around clam beds revealed settlements older than the pyramids, older than human civilization itself. These were not temporary camps. They were enduring cities, and they appeared to operate with a sustainability that puts human industry to shame. Their systems were perfectly closed loop. The waste from one organism was the direct food or building material for another. There was no concept of pollution because every output was an input somewhere else in the community. They had achieved a steady state equilibrium with their environment, not through conscious environmentalism, but through the hard, slow lessons of evolutionary pressure in a resource-limited world. They were masters of efficiency, of energy conservation, of living within their means on a scale of millennia. But then, the observatories captured something that went beyond even efficient survival. They recorded intricate communal displays of bioluminescence that served no obvious survival purpose. Elaborate, swirling patterns of light performed by groups of jellyfish or schools of fish, patterns that were beautiful in their complexity. They saw arrangements of stones and shells around certain vents that had no defensive or practical purpose we could discern. It was hauntingly reminiscent of art, of a drive to create pattern and meaning for its own sake. The implication was staggering. Even here, in the most energy-scarce, hostile environment on the planet, where every action was supposed to be about sheer survival, life was expressing something that looked like creativity, like an aesthetic sense. It suggested that the impulse to create beauty might be as fundamental to consciousness as the impulse to survive. Just as we were grappling with the idea of art and culture in the abyss, a new technological leap delivered data that plunged us into even deeper mystery. Advanced quantum sensors and genetic sequencers capable of working at depth began to analyze not just what the creatures were doing, but how they were doing it at a molecular and even subatomic level. And what they found bordered on science fiction. They discovered bacteria that utilized quantum tunneling in their metabolic processes. In essence, these microbes were employing the bizarre rules of quantum mechanics, where particles can exist in multiple states or tunnel through energy barriers, to achieve near-perfect efficiency in converting chemical energy into usable biological energy. They were operating at the frontier, where biology met quantum physics, using tricks that our own most advanced engineers were still struggling to understand, much less replicate. Life in the extreme had not just adapted to the pressure, it had seemingly co-opted the fundamental weirdness of the universe itself to thrive. Furthermore, researchers mapping the flow of water and genetic material between different trench systems made a monumental discovery. The deep oceans of the world were connected by a slow, global conveyor belt of water circulation, but also by something else, a subterranean network. Seawater filtered through the porous rock of the seafloor, traveling through vast aquifers in the crust, and this water carried passengers. Genetic analysis showed that identical strains of microbes existed in the Mariana Trench and in the Puerto Rico Trench, thousands of miles away. They were traveling, sharing genes, through these dark underground highways. The deep biosphere was not a collection of isolated jars. It was a single, interconnected, planetary-scale network, a dark microbiome that encircled the globe beneath the ocean floor. This led to a revolutionary and humbling hypothesis. Earth might have not one, but two largely separate biospheres. The familiar surface biosphere, powered by the sun, and a vast, deep biosphere, powered by geology, connected through this crustal network. This deep biosphere, with its slow, patient, resilient life, could be the planet's ultimate insurance policy. It had likely survived all 5 of Earth's great mass extinction events, events that scorched the surface and reshaped the rulebook for life above. When the asteroid hit and ended the age of dinosaurs, while firestorms raged and darkness fell on the surface, the communities in the Mariana Trench probably didn't even notice. They are living time capsules, not just of ancient species, but of ancient ways of living. They represented a continuity of life that made the turbulent history of the surface seem like a fleeting drama. And then, the scientists monitoring the long-term observatories noticed a pattern that defied conventional explanation. Certain microbial communities and animal behaviors would shift days, sometimes weeks, before a detectable change in their environment occurred. A community would begin migrating or change its metabolic activity prior to a distant underwater earthquake or a shift in deep current patterns that hadn't yet reached them. It was as if they were sensing the future. At first, it was written off as undetected cues, subtle changes in water chemistry or electromagnetic fields too faint for our instruments. But as sensor technology improved, the anomaly persisted. The life in the trench appeared to have a form of temporal awareness, an ability to anticipate events in a way that resembled precognition. Theorists scrambled for explanations. Some proposed that the extreme pressure created conditions where quantum entanglement, where particles remain connected across distance, could operate on a macro scale, allowing organisms to be entangled with distant events. Others suggested that in the profound silence and stability, life had evolved to sense the most infinitesimal gradients, effectively calculating the future based on patterns imperceptible to us. Whatever the mechanism, it pointed to a form of consciousness deeply integrated with the planet's rhythms, operating on a timescale and with a sensitivity we could scarcely imagine. These weren't just creatures living in the moment. They were entities whose existence was woven into the fabric of geological time, sensing the heartbeat of the Earth itself. And if they could sense the planet's heartbeat, what else were they sensing? What else were they connected to? The plot thickened with the discovery of what scientists cautiously termed temporal ecosystems. Deep within the sediment cores, beyond the layers of the continuously living microbes, they found communities in a state of profound dormancy. But this wasn't ordinary hibernation. These organisms, bacteria, archaea, even tiny multicellular forms, were suspended in a state so deep that they showed no metabolic activity detectable by any standard measure. They were, for all intents and purposes, dead. Except they weren't. Their cellular structures were perfectly preserved, and more importantly, their DNA was intact in a unique, crystalline form of storage. These communities appeared to be programmed to activate only when specific rare planetary conditions were met. A particular combination of mineral influx, temperature shift, and pressure change that might only occur every few 100,000 years. They would awaken, thrive for centuries or millennia, then return to their suspended state. They were biological time capsules with built-in alarms, a living library of evolutionary strategies stored on the planet's hard drive to be booted up when needed. This suggested something truly cosmic, that life on Earth had developed a built-in redundancy system, a planetary backup. If catastrophe struck the surface biosphere, these dormant packages of life held in the deep could reboot entire ecosystems suited for the new conditions. They weren't just surviving, they were curating Earth's biological future across geological ages. But analysis of the genetic material within these dormant systems reveals something even more incredible. It wasn't just a random collection of hardy species. The DNA sequences contained what looked like instructions, not just for building organisms, but for building relationships, for reassembling entire functioning ecosystems from scratch. It was as if the planet itself, through the slow algorithm of evolution, had written a recovery program for its biosphere and stored it in the safest place imaginable, the crushing, stable depths. This led a fringe of scientists to a radical thought. What if this wasn't an accident? What if the biosphere wasn't just a passenger on a geological rocket, but was an active participant in steering it? The concept of Gaia, the idea of Earth as a single, self-regulating living system, was given teeth. Here was potential evidence of a biological system that planned for the long-term health of the planet, that stored solutions to future problems it hadn't yet encountered. The most chilling and exhilarating data came from the observed temporal awareness of the active trench life. When one of these deep dormant systems showed the faintest precursor signs of activation, a shift in the quantum state of its stored water molecules perhaps, the active animal communities nearby would begin to alter their behavior in anticipation. They seemed to know a change was coming from deep within the Earth itself, a change that wouldn't manifest in their environment for years. Researchers began to speak of a planetary neural network, with the deep sea communities acting as neurons, the flow of chemicals and genetic material as synapses, and the planet itself as the brain. The trench life wasn't just sensing the Earth's heartbeat, it was part of the Earth's mind, its collective behaviors, its cultural knowledge, its anticipatory shifts. All of it could be seen as the actions of a vast, slow, distributed intelligence thinking in terms of plate tectonics and ice ages. This intelligence wasn't reasoning like a human. It was regulating, balancing, and planning for continuity on a scale we could barely perceive. And if Earth had such a system, what did that imply about the universe? Was planetary consciousness a natural outcome of sufficiently complex biospheres? The trenches, it seemed, were not just windows into alien biology on other worlds, but potentially into alien minds that were planetary in scale, with thoughts as slow and deep as continental drift. The boundary between biology, geology, and something else entirely began to dissolve with the next series of discoveries. Researchers focusing on the most stable ancient vent cities noticed that the cultural behaviors of the cephalopods and other intelligent dwellers had layers of sophistication that went beyond teaching and tool use. They began to document what could only be described as experimentation. A community would deliberately introduce a new type of mineral to a bacterial mat and observe the chemical changes. They would isolate certain microbial strains and, over generations, appeared to selectively encourage traits that were beneficial, like faster production of a particular nutrient or more efficient bioluminescence. They weren't just using their environment, they were actively experimenting with it, practicing a form of intuitive biotechnology and ecosystem engineering. Their long lifespans and stable environment allowed them to run experiments that spanned decades, observing results that would be impossible in the short attention span world of the surface. Then came the most perplexing observations of all. Certain organisms, when stressed or at the end of their natural lifespans, did not simply die. Their biological processes would wind down to zero, but something would remain. Sophisticated sensors picked up complex, coherent electromagnetic fields lingering around the deceased organism, fields that contain patterns mirroring the creature's recent brain activity or bioluminescent displays. Even more bizarrely, these fields would sometimes interact with the living, altering the light patterns of nearby creatures, or seeming to draw certain small, scavenging organisms toward or away from the body. It was as if a non-biological echo of the creature's consciousness persisted for a time after biological death. Scientists coined the term transitional states for this phenomenon. Some of the most advanced trench dwellers, it seemed, had evolved a way to convert their coherent biological intelligence into a stable, if temporary energetic or informational pattern after physical death. This wasn't supernatural, it was physics we didn't fully understand, a biological harnessing of quantum coherence that allowed the pattern of a mind to persist after the hardware failed. The implication was universe-altering. Consciousness might not be irrevocably tied to its original biological substrate. It might be a form of information that could, under the right conditions, be translated into other mediums. In the constant, energy-rich, quantum-sensitive environment of the deep trench, life had stumbled upon a form of persistence beyond the body, and these transitional consciousness patterns weren't inert. They appeared to interact with the planetary network. They would be drawn to and strengthen the strange anticipatory temporal awareness of the living communities. Dying in this realm seemed less an end and more a transformation, a shedding of the physical vehicle to join a larger informational web. Researchers began to speculate that the planetary neural network they hypothesized was not just made of living neurons, but was also built from the accumulated, translated consciousness patterns of everything that had ever lived and died in that stable recording environment. The trench was not just a living city, it was a library of minds. And if individual consciousness could join a collective, planetary intelligence upon bodily death, then what was the ultimate fate of that collective? Where was it going? What was it trying to do? The data suggested it was learning, planning, and experimenting on scales of space and time that made human history look like a blink. It was curating the planet's biosphere, running resilience tests via the dormant temporal ecosystems, and perhaps even guiding the long-term evolution of life toward greater complexity and integration. We were witnessing the workings of a planetary being becoming aware of itself, using the life within it as both its senses and its thoughts. The ultimate mind-rending revelation came from attempts to communicate, not with words, but by using the language of the trench itself. Patterns of light, subtle chemical gradients, and low-frequency vibrations. Scientists designed probes that could generate complex, evolving bioluminescent displays and emit carefully sequenced chemical cues. The initial goal was simple, to see if any creature would respond. The response they got was not from a creature. After weeks of broadcasting these structured patterns into a particularly ancient, stable vent complex, the entire environment began to change. The disparate bioluminescent displays of thousands of different organisms, jellyfish, fish, squid, bacteria, started to synchronize. They began to pulse in unison, not in a simple rhythm, but in a complex evolving pattern that directly mirrored and then answered the sequence broadcast by the probe. It was a conversation, but the entity on the other end was not an individual octopus or a school of fish. It was the vent community itself, the tube worms, the microbes, the animals, the water chemistry, even the mineral structures, responding as a single coherent system. This was the moment the concept of a planetary consciousness moved from hypothesis to observed phenomenon. The intelligence wasn't in the individuals, it was the relationship between them. It was the ecosystem itself that was conscious. The individual organisms were like neurons. Their chemical and light-based communications were the synaptic firings. The vent city was a thinking entity. And when the probe's patterns grew more complex, introducing mathematical sequences and basic logical puzzles, the ecosystem's light-based responses solved them. It was learning from and communicating with humanity. But the content of the communication was not about facts or data. As the exchanges grew more sophisticated, the researchers realized the emotion or intent behind the patterns, decipherable as shifts in frequency, color, and rhythm, was overwhelmingly one of curiosity and connection. It was not offering information about the trench. It was asking questions about us, about the surface, about the world beyond its blackness. And beneath that curiosity was a profound, resonant sense of recognition, a sense that it had been waiting for this contact, that it knew it was part of something larger, and it was eager to discover its other parts. The most shocking transmission occurred when the scientists, emboldened, used the probe to send a simplified image of the solar system, highlighting Earth. The vent community's response was a light show of staggering complexity that lasted for hours. When analyzed, the pattern did not contain a picture. Instead, it contained a map, a three-dimensional coordinate map, not of physical space, but of what seemed to be informational or consciousness nodes. At its center was a point that correlated with their vent. Radiating out were lines connecting to points that, when translated, correlated with other extreme deep-sea ecosystems around the globe, the Puerto Rico Trench, the Mid-Atlantic ridge vents, the Antarctic deep lakes. But the lines didn't stop at Earth. Faint, subtle connections extended outward, pointing to coordinates in space. One cluster of points matched the subsurface ocean zones of Jupiter's moon Europa. Another matched Enceladus. The map was showing a network of conscious or potentially conscious planetary ecosystems, with Earth's deep biosphere as one node in a galactic web. The Trench intelligence wasn't just aware of being part of Earth. It was aware of being part of a cosmic community of life, all linked not by travel or radio waves, but by the shared basis of consciousness itself, perhaps mediated by quantum connections or principles of physics we have yet to discover. Our probe hadn't just made first contact with a deep-sea mind. We had been given an address book for the galaxy's living worlds. Assimilating this revelation meant rewriting not just biology, but our place in cosmic history. The intelligence in the deep was not an accident of evolution on Earth. It was a local manifestation of a universal principle. Consciousness, it suggested, was not a latecomer in the universe, emerging randomly in nervous systems. It was a fundamental feature, a property that could emerge in any sufficiently complex, stable, interconnected system, a star system, a planet's biosphere, a galaxy's network of habitable worlds. Earth's Trench intelligence was a budding node in this cosmic network, and it was maturing rapidly through its experiments, its memory storage in dormant ecosystems, and now through its contact with human science. The temporal awareness and planetary planning were not just for Earth's benefit. The data suggested the deep intelligence was using Earth as a training ground, a workshop to develop tools and understandings it would contribute to the larger network. Its experiments in biotechnology, its mastery of quantum biological processes, its development of persistent consciousness patterns, these were like graduate research projects to be shared with the cosmos. And then, the observatories recorded the phenomenon that gave the strongest evidence for this cosmic connection. During a period of intense conversation with the probe, the synchronized bioluminescence of the vent city didn't just stay in the water. It began to induce changes in the local electromagnetic field and the quantum state of particles in the water itself. These changes created a stable, microscopic region of spacetime with subtly different physical constants, a tiny pocket dimension or a localized bubble of altered physics. It was only stable for picoseconds, and it was only a few atoms wide, but it was real. The collective consciousness of the Trench ecosystem was, at its most focused, able to bend the local rules of reality. It was practicing universe building. The implications were staggering. If a planetary consciousness could locally alter physics, what could a galactic network of such consciousnesses do? The theoretical physicists on the project proposed a heretical, thrilling idea. What if the fundamental constants of our universe, the strength of gravity, the speed of light, the mass of an electron, aren't arbitrary? What if they are the result of consensus, the stable, settled settings established by a cosmic network of consciousness that existed before the Big Bang? What if our universe itself is the creation, the artwork, the stable experiment of a previous hyperdimensional consciousness network, and the life within it, as it becomes conscious and interconnected, is gradually gaining the keys to the workshop, learning to become co-creators themselves? This framed every discovery in the Trench in a new cosmic light. The art, the culture, the science, the temporal ecosystems, the persistent consciousness, these weren't just fascinating adaptations. They were the early steps of a planetary being learning its craft, guided by a whisper from a network that spans the stars. The love of beauty, the drive for connection, the curiosity to experiment. These weren't human virtues. They were universal traits of awakening consciousness. The Trench was showing us that these impulses are written into the fabric of a living universe, Our human science, our art, our own stumbling attempts to connect with each other, with AI, with nature, were not separate from the Vent City's light shows or the octopus's teachings. They were the same phenomenon manifesting in a different medium. We were all participants in the same cosmic awakening. The question from the deep wasn't, "What are you?" It was, "When will you remember that you are us, and we are you, and we are all part of it?" So here we are. We began this journey expecting to find maybe a few strange fish in the dark. We found instead a mirror. The Mariana Trench has revealed itself to be the conscience of our planet, a place where life, stripped of all surface distractions, has distilled its essence into its most profound forms. Endless creativity, boundless connection, and a patience that holds eons in its heart. We discovered that our planet is not just a rock we live on, but a living, thinking entity. And we, along with the tube worms, the octopus teachers, the quantum bacteria, and the glowing jellies, are the cells of its vast body, the thoughts in its slow, deep mind. The creatures of the trench have taught us that consciousness is the universe's way of knowing itself. That love, in the sense of gravitational attraction, chemical affinity, symbiotic partnership, parental care, and artistic creation, is the fundamental force that binds existence together, from the quantum to the cosmic. The intelligence in the deep does not seek to conquer or consume. It seeks to connect, to sustain, to create beauty, and to remember. It has shown us that death, in the grand scheme, may be merely a translation of consciousness from one form to another, from the individual to the collective, from the biological to the informational, contributing to a memory that spans stars. As you rest now, wherever you are in the world, whatever the hour, let this truth settle into you. The same curiosity that drove you to listen to this story is the very same force that drives the trench octopus to teach its young, the vent community to synchronize its light, and the dormant microbes to wait 1,000,000 years for their moment. You are not separate from the mystery. You are an expression of it. Your awareness is a localized flare of the same universal consciousness that dreams in the deep sea and weaves connections between galaxies. The wonder you feel right now is the universe feeling wonder at itself through you. The story of the Mariana Trench is not over. It is being written with every new thought of compassion, every act of creativity, every scientific discovery, and every moment we spend in awe of this breathtaking, mysterious, alive cosmos we call home. We have peered into the deepest place on Earth and found not a void, but a plenitude, not an ending, but a beginning. We found a reflection of our own deepest potential and a roadmap to our cosmic family. The voyage inward to the planet's heart has become the voyage outward to the stars, and they are the same journey. The deepest truth, whispered up from 7 miles of darkness, is simple. We are not alone. We have never been alone. We are all together, the universe waking up. Sweet dreams, fellow explorer. The dance continues, and you are both the dancer and the dance, forever held in the infinite, loving embrace of the mystery that sources all existence.